Yeah. So if you could just give me a basic rundown of what your goal is with cybersecurity. I understand that you are also, you're in Josh's developer direction, and you mentioned to me earlier that you wanted to get a feel for cybersecurity if it was something you'd be interested in. Now that you've went through the full course, just kind of let me know what what your plan is for cybersecurity. If it's something that you intend to keep on pursuing, or you just want to get a taste of it, and are you going to go down the developer route, or what is sort of your plan?
Yeah, so after the course as well, going through it, I think I'm like more interested in it than I was prior. And so my thing is, and maybe this is just like how I think, and this is probably my flaw, but I keep falling into thinking that it has to be one or the other. Like, oh, I have to become a programmer or I have to be like in cybersecurity. So I'm trying to like to find a good way to combine the two if it's possible. But then when I think about that, maybe this is where you can help me. I worry that I'll try to do both and I won't advance in either. And then I'll just kind of be in the same place where I am. And so um, I really just want to like move forward and try to get into, this industry the fastest way that I can. Personally, I would like to do that quickly. And if that is in cybersecurity, then I'd be definitely interested in doing that.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely helps to have that clarified. I would say that, yeah, I think we were talking about this earlier on Telegram, but basically what I was saying is that they are very synergistic in the sense that like all the people on my team, they are, all the pen testers on my team, they are able to code and they have a basic level of understanding with code. Now, are they at like a software developer level? No. Um, actually maybe a couple of them might be, but those are the ones that are like really focused on like the web app side. But yeah, for the
Mhm.
most part, they have the skill, but it's not to the same degree as like a developer. And, there's a lot of developers that have some basic cybersecurity skills, though it is more rare, but those ones are always more valuable to their team, because all the time, I was saying this a little bit before, but like all the time, like on the pen test that I do on the daily job is, if I do a web app pen test, then I'm corresponding with those developers. And usually as part of their deployment process, they have to get security approval. And the ones that don't really understand the security side, what ends up happening is they didn't code it securely the first time. So then they have to go back and, we have to, for one thing, we have to report the vulnerability to them, but then they have to fix it before they can even go live. And that puts them in a lot of pressure as far as like their deadlines and things like that. And even in all their future deployments, it becomes an issue. And then it takes them longer to fix it because they don't understand what the issue is and they have to get all the information from the report. Whereas with the app teams that have like developers that are pretty knowledgeable on the security side, I've noticed that it's been a much smoother process for that stuff, a lot less friction and all of that. So from a business standpoint, right? Like if you were like putting together a software development team, you would want the ones that could produce like the greatest, produce the most products at the least cost, obviously, right? So definitely the ones that have security knowledge are going to be able to be a lot more beneficial to the business. With that being said, now I would say most developers don't have much knowledge of cybersecurity, and that's been like a huge issue. Now, even ignoring all that stuff, like if you were going to go on like say develop your own app or something like that, or build your own software, still knowing cybersecurity is even more, I would say even more critical at that point, because if you look at like the cryptocurrency space, like all of the projects that, or most of the projects that have experienced like a major hack, a lot of times that's been like the death of their project. And you see the same thing within the startup world where like, some software company emerges and they have a good product, but then it gets hacked. People lose all their trust in it. And it's really hard to recover from that. So those are some things to keep in mind. Now, I will say that is a very good point that you bring up of, you don't want to end up really slowing yourself down a lot because you're trying to split your time too much between the two of these things. So my recommendation for that would be to, and it should be a little bit easier for you now to decide this now that you've been through, because you've been through one of Josh's courses as well, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So now that you've gotten like a decent taste of like development side and the cybersecurity side, I would say like the next step for you is to really get clear on which one you're going to pursue for your next job. Like which one would you see yourself doing as a next job? And because they're so synergistic, it's not like you're locked into that forever. So if you become a software developer, you could go into cybersecurity down the line as well. I know I've worked with a lot of people that came from developer jobs into cybersecurity, and even vice versa as well. If you pursue cybersecurity, you can become a developer as well. I know people have went like the opposite way on that. I actually worked with a guy on my first team that I worked with, and he ended up doing that. He was a security analyst, and then he went into the startup world as a developer with one of the startups here. So yeah, you're not like super siloed either way, but what you want to do is you do want to get clear on which one you're going to pursue next. And then what you want to do is you would still learn. So say you pick cybersecurity, you would still learn the development side. So you'd learn how to program, but you just wouldn't prioritize it as heavily. What you don't want to do is take like a 50-50 approach where you're putting an equal amount of time into both, because then you're just hampering yourself, right? So, maybe what it would look like if you, like hypothetically, if you chose cybersecurity, it might look more of like an 80-20 split or something like that, where 80% of your time and focus is in cybersecurity and then 20% in programming. That's basically the approach that I took because, cybersecurity is my main area, but I still put in time, and, I can program just as well as a lot of like, I would say like junior developers and stuff like that. And eventually with programming, you get to a point where, okay, maybe you don't know how to build the thing, but you know that you could look it up and figure out how to build the thing. That's something that Josh talks about all the time, is that a lot of the time you're going to be Googling stuff, even if you're a senior developer, you're going to be Googling stuff. So yeah. And basically I would say that, yeah, it's going to be synergistic either way, but that's what I would recommend as like your next steps.
Yeah. And how do you find that? I know you said 80-20, but what does that practically look like for you?
Yeah. So, did you see, I know I covered it a little bit in the course, but did you watch my video that I came out with on one of the paths that you can go down to become a pen tester? I had like the whole like mind map and everything.
I only saw what you showed us in the course.
Basically, just to give you like the synopsis of that is, I kind of broke down like where programming would fit in the overall picture in terms of the things you need to learn before you can get a job in cybersecurity. Just for my information, where are you at with programming, would you say?
Still pretty new. Josh is having us do an AP project with an API.
Oh, perfect.
And the first time I'm doing anything like that. And the first project I did before this one was I was working with a partner with making a browser calculator in like a web browser.
Okay, yeah, that's really good. So you've gotten into some of the more like logical type of programming stuff, like beyond just like static web pages and stuff like that. So that's really good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but by no means like super like advanced either. So
yeah, no. Yeah. So yeah, part of that mind map as well. And that mind map is based off of, if you go for like a web app focus, which I think would make a lot of sense in your case, web app pen testing, if you decide to go the pen testing route, because that would synergize a lot with like the programming side. But then as far as what you should be learning with like programming and stuff like that, is that's actually one really good thing. Oh yeah, I'm glad you're doing the API stuff, because you, like I was saying in the course, one of the assessments you might get is an API assessment. And so it really helps to be familiar with, like, first of all, what an API is and how it works. And obviously, if you have the experience of putting one together, or even just consuming an API that exists out there, that's going to be a lot of like background knowledge that you're going to need before you can start looking for vulnerabilities in that technology, right? So that would be a really big one. And then what I would say is you can also take a very synergistic approach with the type of programming that you do as well. So for example, you're learning how to do a lot of these, it sounds like more the logical, like backend type of programming now. So what you can do is while you're studying cybersecurity and you're learning about, let's say you're learning about how to use a certain tool or something like that. Well, you can start combining the two together where you try to figure out how can I automate that tool with code. So you can figure out how can I create a program that will automatically run this tool, take the output of that and do something with it, whatever makes sense in that situation. This is actually how I learned how to code mostly. Most of it was figuring out, and even with your current job as well, there might be some, I'm not exactly sure what it entails, but maybe there's something that you could automate as part of the job. That was another thing that I did a lot when I was first learning this stuff. I wasn't directly in a developer role or anything like that, but I was doing some system administration stuff for backup servers. And I started to see like, okay, how can I use code to automate what I'm already doing? And for one thing, that was like way more engaging for me personally than if I were to just do tutorials like from like some website or some book or something like that, because it was actually meaningful work to me. So yeah, in the similar way, if you're doing cybersecurity, figure out how you can make it meaningful to you by automating something that'll make you more efficient at that.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you basically is that pursuing at least experience in both areas of programming, cybersecurity, like programming, it won't hurt, like it'll only help with my pursuit of like if I go like full-fledged for cybersecurity. So there shouldn't be any conflict, I guess, between the two.
Yeah, not at all. The only way that it could kind of harm you is if you go for a 50-50 split and you're not sure yourself if you're going to go for a programming job first or a cybersecurity job first. Mm-hmm. Because you want to get clear on which one that you're going to pursue as a career. And then that allows you to prioritize from there. So for example, if you pick, say you pick cybersecurity just as an example, then it automatically will narrow your scope as far as the interview process, right? Because you can just focus on cybersecurity interviewing and what are the questions you need to know and, how can you pass those interviews most effectively. Whereas if you were 50-50 split, then you'd have to figure out software developer interviews and cybersecurity interviews as well. So it does reduce the amount of work you need to do. And as well, if you're not sure either, then you have to learn coding up to like a software developer level, which is definitely a lot more than you would need as a pen tester. But the more you know, the more skill you have in programming, the better it's going to make you in pen testing as well. So they are very synergistic.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just have to, I'll have to just decide where I want to allocate my energy and my time with that. So I'm going to really try to think about that. So like a question I had, so I know where I already have my programming like curriculum, like with Josh and Didi. What should I start thinking about with like cybersecurity? Because I was kind of looking at like certifications, like Network Plus or something like that. I don't know what you would recommend.
Yeah, very good question. We can spend the rest of the time charting that out for you. This is like I said, this is the web app pen testing focus. No matter what focus area you go for, which just to reiterate, I think this would be a good focus for you specifically. But no matter which area you specialize in within pen testing, these are the 4 things you're always going to want to start with. Now, in the course, we went pretty far down this pathway here. So we, obviously we covered the basics of HTTP, Burp Suite, and the vulnerabilities and stuff we covered that kind of falls under the black box pen testing, or white and gray box as well a little bit when we were looking at code. And I was telling you vulnerabilities in code, but yeah, we covered, that's where all of that falls in, if there's any question on that. But yeah, we basically went along this top area here. But before you're really ready to apply to jobs, you want to go down these other paths as well, just as like a core foundation. So I would say next, you're going to want to, I mean, you're already part of the way into this, right? You're starting to get to a point where you're ready to, it sounds like you're almost ready to start figuring out how can you take what you know about code and use that to like create some automation tools and automate your workflow. A lot of times that is how, as pen testers, we're using code. The other area is like if there's an exploit or something like that, usually it's already written by someone else, unless you're getting into exploit development, which is whole nother focus area. But usually you're going to be using an exploit someone else already wrote, and you might need to modify that code to get it to work against whatever you're targeting. And that shouldn't be too hard for you, since you are going down this route through Josh's courses a little bit. So you're about at this stage, I would say, already for programming. Now, yeah, so the next area that you'd want to focus in would be some networking basics and learning like some command line. And maybe you learned some command line through developer direction already. I know that he does show you guys a little of the basics on that stuff. Yeah. So yeah, probably you already gotten this down. This is probably then the area I would focus on immediately next. Once you're done going through the course stuff. And by the way, with the course, this is always something you can revisit. So don't feel like you have to have understood every topic and every detail of the course. You know, there's going to be stuff that, I mean, for me personally, right? Like when we're covering insecure deserialization, like I said, I had just scratched the surface of my knowledge on it, years ago. And then it wasn't until years later where I revisited it and it really clicked with me. So that's why it's good to have some of those more advanced topics in the course so that they're at least on your radar of like, this is something that I should, spend some time with at some point. But as long as you understand the basics of all the vulnerabilities and you feel like you could explain it in a job interview, and for some of the ones that we covered earlier in the course, those tend to be like the more like core ones that you really need to be at least comfortable in doing some exploitation in. Towards the end, where the little bit more advanced ones that can certainly be helpful as well. But I was especially, for stuff like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, you want to have like a basic level of proficiency with actually exploiting them as well. And so, yeah, once you feel like you're on that level with everything, I would, immediately go over to like the networking basics and learn about like things like subnetting and, how IP addresses break down. Like what is like an IP address, like the different classes of them. And, so
if I wanted to study like Network Plus, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, what I would recommend is that's actually a good idea, is to study Network Plus. I wouldn't personally spend my time taking the certification just because it's not that great of a return on your investment. But I would take like some study material from Network Plus and use that. Actually, that is exactly what I did when I was first learning networking. Is I took some study material for the Network Plus and just use that to learn networking, and then moved on. Really, you don't have to get too in depth in Network Plus. That's another thing as well. Like Network Plus is going to give you more information than you need just to move forward here. So it's also going to save you some time if you don't fully pursue the certification. But yeah, that could be a very good strategy as well. I mean, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there you can watch that explain it very well, in my opinion. Okay. And yeah, so then from there, you can get into some basic network pen testing. Yeah, you don't need to go too far in depth with the network pen testing stuff, because this is a whole nother focus area in itself. But yeah, just having the basics. So there's like some very common ports, for example, that correspond to very common services you'd encounter. And I even have some videos in my beginners playlist that touch on some of these. It might be worth it when you're looking into this. But yeah, just learning some basic network pen testing. And it sounds like from where you're at already, Linux and Windows command line is something that you want to get even more familiar with. Get familiar with like the Linux operating system as well. We use Linux a lot as pen testers. Now, we didn't really use it too much in this course because a lot of what we're focused on was web app stuff. But even within web app pen testing, there are some tools that you can use through the command line that can help you with web app pen testing as well, just so you know. Especially in network pen testing, there's going to be a lot of command line tools that you run. And so a lot of times they're going to be working from a Linux machine. So I would say, you did tell me that you already installed VirtualBox, which is awesome. Did you actually get any VMs set up in there yet, or?
Yeah, Kali Linux.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah. So that's what I would say next.
One on Mac, on my MacBook.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you have a MacBook, then yeah, you probably already have a decent familiarity with like a Linux terminal because it's not too much different. The operating system is pretty similar because they're both based off of Unix. And so there's a lot of crossover there. But yeah, perfect. I would say just take the Kali Linux VM you have and get more familiar with where all the where everything is located, how to use it, and just get more familiar there. And then on the Windows side, you can learn like some basic Windows command line and PowerShell, stuff like that. Nothing too crazy, just very simple stuff. Like maybe you could think of some common tasks. I think that I said this in this video actually, but maybe you could think of some common tasks that you would do anyways, like I guess for you, right? You're using Mac. So think about common tasks you do on a Mac, right? Like say I need to have a bunch of image files and I want to move them from this folder to this other folder, right? Well, try to challenge yourself to do that on the command line. Just make sure you back up those files first because you don't want to end up losing all your files or something like that. But yeah, you could do something like that. Is like, okay, how can I move these files from this folder to this other folder using the command line? And that's a really good exercise to do. Now, since you're using VirtualBox, another thing you can do is you can download a Windows virtual machine, which is something you'd probably need to do since your computer is a Mac. So you can do that for free, by the way. I'll show you really quick. I'll pull it up. If you go to Microsoft's site, you can download, what is the web browser called? Edge virtual machine. Yeah, so I can send you this link afterwards as well. But basically what I Googled for was just like Edge virtual machine. So they have this is technically the reason they offer this is for people that want to develop their apps to use the Microsoft Edge browser. But basically they allow you to install a Windows virtual machine. So you can I would just go with the 64-bit version here on the bottom and then say for VirtualBox, and now download the ISO file for you. And actually, it might be a pre-built VM. But basically, once you have that, you can just import that into VirtualBox. And now you have a Windows 10 machine that you can use. Cool. Yeah,
I'm definitely look into that.
Yeah, so that will help you with that. And then once you have that basic familiarity there is when you're ready to start getting into some privilege escalation. So basically what that means is that sometimes like when you exploit a web server and, if you do something that gets you like code execution, like we're talking about in the course, a lot of times you'll have access, but you won't have like full access onto the server. So you'll basically have access of whatever level of access the web server that you exploited has, because you're basically going to be the web server's user account. So this is where privilege escalation comes into play. You see if there's any vulnerabilities that exist on the server that would allow you to gain full access to the system, meaning like you have permission to pretty much do anything an administrator could do on that server. And it's a little, the tools and techniques are different between Linux and Windows for how you can actually go about doing that. So yeah, this is where you want to start looking into that stuff. Find out like what are the common vulnerabilities that exist on both Linux and Windows to allow you to do that. And then after that, you want to get into some basic Active Directory pen testing stuff. So figure out like what is Active Directory. It's related to Windows. That's why I have it on this line right here. So Windows Active Directory, just to give you a basic synopsis of what it is on this call. Essentially what it is it's a program. It's software from Microsoft that pretty much 99% of companies use in their internal network, because what it allows them to do is it allows them to manage all of their users' permissions by assigning them to different groups. So for example, if I have like a finance team and I have an IT, a finance organization, IT organization, and, HR and all these different departments, we don't want the HR people to have this, access to the same stuff as the IT people, but it would also be very cumbersome to go into each user's account and assign them permissions manually. So instead, what we do is we assign them to like the HR group or the IT group, and we assign permissions to that group, and we just manage the permissions on that group. So that's obviously like really useful for all companies. So pretty much every company will use that. Now, the thing is, there are a lot of really unique vulnerabilities that are present in Active Directory. And a lot of times they're just kind of exploiting not necessarily a vulnerability per se, but just how Active Directory actually works. And so, especially on red teaming, like this could be a whole nother path, by the way. If you wanted to be a red teamer, if you went down like a red team focus, this would be something you'd spend even more time on. But as someone who just wants to, say focus on web app pen testing or just get a job in the field, you don't have to be a complete expert at this or anything, but you want to know like what it is and what are the common attacks that exist in Active Directory, because all the Active Directory or like most of the Active Directory based attacks are very specific to this technology. So they're kind of unique. But a lot of times the reason that I say you want to learn this is that, well, for one thing, right, I'm just saying 99% of organizations use it. But for another thing, even if you're specializing in web app pen testing, a lot of times I've seen on these job interviews that they'll still ask you some questions about this, even if it's not something you're going to be doing on the day-to-day job, because it's like considered a very core piece of knowledge to have. And then, yeah, just going along this end here, I was just talking about, basic web app development, and you're pretty much already doing that through Josh's courses. So I wouldn't even worry too much there. Just keep, spending some time in Josh's stuff, and you're going to be doing this. You've probably done this already. And then from here is like the more advanced stuff. One of the things I have here, I know the screen's cut off from where I'm currently at, but one of the things I had was build an API. So you're already doing that, which is excellent. But yeah, I would say really once you get through this tree here and then this tree here, that at that point you're ready to start applying for jobs in the field. And along the lines, like while you're applying to jobs, you want to start doing the what I call black box web app pen testing. And what that is I know I've talked about it a lot on my channel, but I don't know. Are you familiar with like CTFs or anything like that?
I've heard about them, but I've never looked into doing one.
Gotcha. So I would say, let me just pull one up for you. So once you've went through these two trees here, and you're on this area of your learning path, what I would say is that you can use a site like Try HackMe. It's a really popular one, and what they have is they have a bunch of vulnerable machines that you can practice exploiting. And usually the way they work is that, you end up exploiting a vulnerability. A lot of them are web apps, which is perfect for you. You end up usually exploiting a vulnerability in a web application to get remote code execution, which is a little bit what we covered in the course. But then from there, usually you just have basic user level access. So you also need to use some of the privilege escalation techniques that you learned to fully compromise the system. And that's the whole, that's the whole challenge basically where, and the nice thing about this site specifically is some of them, they range from easy to more difficult challenges. And this is where you're really going to level up a lot because this is where you're actually doing all this stuff, putting everything together, basically. All the stuff that you've learned is all coming together. Like you could use some of the automation tools that you developed to gain more information about a system as well. So here's where you can really pull everything together that you've learned. So if I just click on this one here, some of these machines will be like this, where it won't even give you like any kind of hints or anything like that, where other than to say like, this is the website you need to go to. Basically what you do with this is you hit start machine. It'll give you an IP address. You would want to use this with Kali Linux, right? And you connect to the VPN on the site. And yeah, you just start testing this web application, look for a vulnerability. And basically why it's called capture the flag is there's different flags that you got to find as you gain different levels of access into the application. So it'll ask you some questions just to prove that, you've got access. And so what I would think here is that this is probably something on the website once you maybe get into the admin panel or something. It's been a while since I've done this, so I don't know what exactly this one entails. But then this one is probably once you get code execution as a basic user. And then this is one that you can only get when you're the root user, once you fully compromise the machine. But yeah, some of them will be very little guidance like that. But then some other ones will be like a lot more guided challenges that you can do. Let's see. I think this one is one example of that. Yeah, like this one will tell you exactly, it will kind of walk you through it like, hey, you need to scan the machine and then, how many ports are open. It's kind of like holding your hand through the process. These would probably be the kind that are best for you to start with when you're first doing the CTFs, but eventually you're going to move on to the ones with like no guidance and then more and more difficult ones. And that's going to help you a ton just across the board, really solidify your knowledge and on interviews as well. And also a lot of times, like I was saying in the course, one thing that I've seen, especially in recent years for the job interviews, is that a lot of times there will be some kind of technical component as part of the interview process. Typically in the later rounds, they're going to want to see like, okay, this guy interviewed well. We can tell like he has a solid theoretical background, but before we hire him on, we need to make sure that he's actually capable of doing the actual technical work that we're looking for. So a lot of times they'll give you, like the current job that I have, they actually gave me machines from one of the popular CTF sites that I had to do, ones that there were no solutions available for. So like I had to be able to actually fully compromise those servers. They gave me like 5 days to hack into 4 servers. And that was part of the requirements for me to get the job. So definitely an area that you want to spend some time in. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question on all that. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps. That gives me a lot more direction. I'll probably go back and look at this this video you're showing me right now as well.
Yeah.
But that's cool that it kind of helps me kind of see from a bird's eye view how it kind of all integrates together better. So that was really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. Did you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I guess I had kind of a more like I want to make sure that I'm not because like I'm currently just in DD, so I kind of want to make sure I'm not like crossing any boundaries, but like how much, if at all, am I able to reach out to you like with questions, or is that, do you kind of reserve that more for your people who are in your yearly group?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. Yeah. So you can always ask questions on the Mastermind Chat, and that's going to continue to be available for everyone that bought the course, the one we just did. So I'll answer as many as I can. Usually the value of the year pass basically is that like you get like the live calls and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
sometimes I am really busy with like with different stuff that I have going on. So I always try to make sure that I prioritize those guys first. But yeah, I definitely answer the questions, as many as I can in just the regular chat as well. So yeah, that's always available to you.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
No, I think that's like a lot. All those tasks are going to be what I'm going to focus on
Yeah.
for this period of time. And like as I kind of make progress in that, I know other things will start coming up that I'll probably need to know, like ask questions about. So